The Emile 2 was amazing in World of Tanks console, but the Kranvang, the tier 10, is it that good? Is it as good? We're about to find out. And today's replays, we've got two of them, and they are really, really good replays showcasing why this vehicle is potentially better than the T57 Heavy, which is the vehicle that we showcased probably a couple days ago now on the channel. So it's one of my favourites, or at least one of my new favourites, because it has pretty much everything that the 57 Heavy has, but it gets turret armour, and not just any turret armour that you can sit in front of some of the highest penetration tank destroyers in the game and not have to even worry whatsoever. So the other thing is that it gets 1600 alpha, or at least within its clip potential, 1600 damage can be done within the 4 shells that you get, obviously 400 per shell, and if you can track people like we try and track this Type 61, then you can come away with the full amount of damage that you'd probably be hoping for. Of course, you can see me here just trying to make sure I get the shot on the AMX 13105, and we do successfully do that. The Foch 155 at the back also receives a shell, and you can see here doing 1583 damage within those 4 shells, slightly low rolling, but at the start of the game, only 1.5 minutes in, yeah, 1500 damage is no mean feat. So really, really nice. And of course you can do this within your own tanks, and these vehicles are really good for the early game and also the late game, because at the beginning you can always catch people out on full health, and you can kind of catch them like we saw there with the Type 61, where then maybe they're crossing early in the game. You get into a position to be able to deal with the 4 shots of damage, and then you can kind of move around the game how you see fit. And that's always what I do with these types of autoloaders, with the 57 Heavy, with the Kranvang, the Batchat, any of these sort of kind of autoloaders that are fairly low reload times. If you're looking at a Waffle 100 with the 15cm, maybe not, but you know, it's definitely a lot easier when you've only got a 20-second reload. Now the Kranvang does indeed have a slightly longer reload than the 57 Heavy, so you're looking at about, I think it's in the region of 22 seconds, somewhere in that sort of area. So it's not particularly amazing, which compared to the 57 Heavy, which I believe is actually just 19 seconds or somewhere in that area. But with the Kranvang, of course, you do get the turret armor to kind of make up for that, which means sometimes you can put yourself in a position where you get hulled down, which the 57 Heavy may not have been able to get into without taking a ton of damage, and therefore the position becomes less viable. Whereas in the Kranvang, you can go into that position and you can come away with the damage that you wouldn't have with the 57 Heavy. So a pretty slow start after picking up that 1600 damage at the beginning, only managing to get 1 extra shell on a tank that wasn't even having enough hit points to be able to remove. But we do actually spot the FV4005. Now you see me here every single time I'm going for that tracking shell, and this is exactly why, because we have locked down the FV4005 and we've managed to hit him twice, I believe, and also managed to track him, which has given us some assistance damage as well. Now we get spotted up here, which is not particularly amazing because there is a 57 Heavy in their base that's kind of looking over this direction. The one thing with the Kranvang is that the side of the turret armor, so if they do actually manage to get any of the side armor, it's pretty bad. You're going to be taking a lot of hits. So you've got to keep your frontal armour towards the opponents, as you should do with most vehicles. Now you saw there, 26.1 second reload, so it's substantially more than the 57 Heavy. So it does impact it a little bit. But I don't feel like I'm at that much of a disadvantage with having a 26-second reload and 1600 alpha, meaning approximately you could get off 2 full clips if you were ready to fire both of the time, like after you're fully reloaded. Obviously, the effective DPM is very, very good with an autoloader, especially with good accuracy that the Kranvang gets. It's not awful, especially if you're running vertical stabilizers, which is almost a must when using any autoloader, because it's the intra-clip kind of dispersion that you get that causes the problem. So that's the kind of accuracy bloom after you fire your first shell that can end up being a little bit annoying if you are trying to rapidly get off your shells, especially if you're in something like a TVPT 5051, for example, where you probably have the intricate reload faster than the actual aim time between them. So that's really where vertical stabilizers comes in kind of very important. So, within this replay, 5,000 damage done. Yes, we're up to 5,000 already with 1,026 assistance. Unfortunately, we get spotted. I'm a little bit hesitant as to what can hit us from the other side, but knowing that there isn't really anything there, we are going towards the E100, which we do manage to successfully pen 3 times. Can we get the 4th and final one? No, we can't, because remember, heat ammunition, we're firing quite a lot because it's all part of this kind of ongoing effort to see whether or not firing more premium has actually impacted my stats at all. And you'll see a whole video on that as it comes out fairly soon, because we've been doing it basically for November, and the November videos just firing a lot more premium, hence why some of you have seen some of that happening within some of the replays. But you can see here, just pressing our advantage towards the E100, just trying to get as many shots of damage as possible. Try and go for a cheeky little shot on the E4, but it doesn't actually end up connecting. And so now it's time to pull back, use the camo of this vehicle. Unfortunately for us, I don't realise that we're reloading an APCR clip here. So yes, I am going to be reloading 2 shots for a 26-second reload, which obviously doesn't take a genius to work out is the worst idea possible in an autoloader. So definitely don't do that unless you actually have to. And the problem with the APCR rounds as standard is that they just do not have the penetration to go through something like an E100 at that far range. And also, if you're coming up against heavily armoured vehicles, something like an E3 might be quite a bit of a struggle to be able to reliably go through with APCR. So carrying heat rounds is definitely a must in these sorts of tanks, because it can be the difference between you getting 1,600 damage and getting 0 damage, because remember, autoloaders can kind of compile. If you can successfully pen all 4 shots, that's way better than, or way riskier than maybe if you were to have a fast firing gun and be able to fire 4 shots, because effectively if you had the wrong round loaded for 1, then you wouldn't be able, well, you could just swap to the other ammunition, whereas with an autoloader you don't get that option. If you have chosen the wrong round, you're going to have to fire all 4 or take a reload as quickly as possible to avoid having to fire that round, for example. So it's kind of one of those things you'll have to like master, and it's not particularly that difficult. Just pick the round that you think you're going to be best in most scenarios, and then occasionally you'll be in a scenario where maybe it isn't the best round to take, and therefore you can kind of deal with it as it comes. You can see me here going for the cupola of the Jagdpanzer E100, just trying to avoid getting hit by him, because it is possible that he could pen us, but we hit him in the lower plate and we actually managed to pen, and we of course pen the Panzer 7's mantlet, I believe, which is a weak point, but we were aiming for the side weak point, so yeah, got a little bit lucky with that final shell. But we picked up 8,300 damage and 4 enemies destroyed with 1,700 base experience, so a really good result, especially considering me and BMX over there had 14,000 combined damage in the game. And I believe when we have a look at the scoreboard in a little second, we would have been able to pick up most of the damage in the game between us. And of course, we picked up over 10,000 combined damage with the assistance. And you can see there, between the top 3, we probably did like, I don't know, 80% of the damage in the game. So really crazy how only 3 players can end up with 80 to 90% of the damage throughout the entire team. But yeah, really good result. Let's jump into the next one and showcase a little bit something different. Now, the next replay that we've got is something completely different to the previous, and that is ultimately what I try and do in these videos, is try and get a diverse range of replays where maybe you have the great, really good game where everything goes perfectly and you're ending up just farming damage off of people, but What happens in the more average replays, some of these things where not everything goes your way, maybe you don't get necessarily the team support that you'd like. Obviously, you should never rely on your team. I absolutely never rely on a team within World of Tanks console, because 90% of the time it always backfires on you. But, where you just think maybe someone would have done something, it's in those results where it can be a little bit annoying. But either way, we're on Fisherman's Bay, and it's not a bad replay, or not a bad matchup for us, because there are tier 8s in the game, and there's a few of them. But you're seeing here us coming up against the T-77 and the Bourrasque, and we've got a little bit of damage early on. And we're also trying now to get some extra. Don't know why the Bourrasque on the enemy team YOLO'd towards me and continued, but he obviously got removed very, very quickly. But one thing that you'll find with the Kranvang and also the Emil is that they don't have the worst view range. So even if you are in a match where maybe you're feeling I'm just not able to get any damage, or it's I'm being limited by how much damage I can get because there's just not a lot being shown to me, you can also get assistance damage with this tank. Now, should you be playing it like a light tank? Absolutely not, but you can definitely put yourself in a position, especially aggressively, where maybe you could show your turret armor, because it has a brilliant turret armor, then yeah, you could come away with a really, really nice result. Now, the T-77, obviously, I don't know what was going on in his brain, but obviously some flies floating around in there, messing with his neurons and stuff like that, but yeah, he comes YOLOing over the central ridge on Fisherman's Bay, which is one of the worst things you can do, just for literally 2 shots of damage, given that he was nearly on full health. He's back in the garage now anyway, but you're seeing here 2,300 damage done, so not particularly the best game, maybe slightly better than the previous, even though we had a really nice exchange at the beginning. But you can see me here just trying to feather some shots on some opponents who are maybe being quite aggressive. You're seeing there the Object 277, there's a Batchat 12T, who maybe I could have got a shot on, but I didn't want to risk it, because remember, in an autoloader, if you miss a shell, it becomes basically the thing where you're then going to either have to reload to make it worth your next engagement, or you're going to have to kind of deal with the fact that you are going to be one shell down, and anything you then take on from that point, you need to accept that maybe you don't have the alpha damage to actually deal enough damage to kind of completely stop your opponent, and that sort of thing. But in this, we're not really too worried about it, because we didn't fire. We did try and fire on the 277. I wasn't entirely sure what was going on here, but then I realised, it's Eclipse's internet again. As with all of these, it seems to be my internet. But you can see here the Batchat 12T remained in the same position, and of course the perfect mechanic does decide to take off some extra hit points that we did have on the vehicle, making it really annoying. We're now getting hit in the back because our entire team's kind of sat around not doing a whole lot. And they're in the town, they're not just pushing when maybe they should. So I decided, you know what, maybe we should be the ones pushing, because obviously the team don't want to do that, and sometimes you do actually have to move, because yes, World of Tanks is all jolly and good when you've sat behind a building and you've done 3 shots of damage for free and you haven't taken any, but then when there's 12 people on the enemy team at the end of the game, because you've been sat around for so long, they come and finish you off before you can even fire 1 shell extra. So yeah, there's a lot of those sorts of players, and yes, you may be able to get a base standard amount of damage, but you'll never ever end up with the decent chunks of damage which you'd probably be wanting. But you can see here, I'm very conscious of Arty, we know what it's capable of, so I'm just sitting behind the building for a second to make sure that we kind of avoid any potential shells that they could sling in, because it's looking like I may need to carry this game, not entirely sure. Of course, artillery can see when you break stuff, so if an artillery player actually has a brain, they can go and shoot at you because they know where you've broken something, they can predict how fast you're going to be, dependent on the tank type, and that sort of thing. So you're seeing us try and progress, maybe catch someone out who's in the open field over near their base, having done 3,300 damage. I'm really hoping to push that up even further, because there's it's looking like the game's kind of coming to a close and we're not entirely sure how it's going to end up at the end. And our team still sat back in the central area. The Chisel on the enemy team does indeed get spotted. We are down to 3 shells within the magazine, which is not good. I'm trying to feather a shot on the Chisel here, because if we can get him out and kind of focus on some of these, then maybe we can come away with a victory. But they claw one of our tanks back from that result there. And you're seeing me here just trying to aim a shell. The Dragon on the enemy team, of course, moving forward. I forget that it's heat rounds that we're firing here, and the shell velocity is terrible, so we missed that one shell, which is really disappointing. There is that Chisel that I need to be very aware of, and if we could finish him off, that would be perfect. But of course the shell misses when we really needed it to hit. Our team still sat in the same position that they've been in for about 4 minutes. Of course, being a heavy tank behind where the cap circle is and behind where you actually spawn, I expect on a really nice amount of damage, probably somewhere in the region of about 300 so far. But yeah, what we're trying to do at this point is just protect ourselves. I don't want to get caught out in the open, because we're going to have to try and carry this game. But it's one of those things where I'm kind of hoping that the enemy team don't just YOLO me. Unfortunately, it's probably the worst tank that I want to see, and we don't manage to fully penetrate our shell, which means we can't now take him out all in one clip, which means he's going to come around and he's going to clip us. Of course, the team still sat in the same position, even though like 90% of the enemy team are spotted. There's only probably one tank that isn't spotted. I pinged to my teammates, but there's literally nothing I can do here. And this is where the reload of this tank just comes in crap. And of course, the enemy team tanks are all autoloaders, and don't worry, because our friendly tanks are still sat in base. Oh no, the Ragnarok's moved, and of course it's a TNH at the back of the map on 800 damage, but unfortunately don't come away with a win. But even in that sort of scenario, we can still come away with a decent chunk of damage. I hope that gave you a little bit of a variety for the Kranvang and whether or not it's actually any good. Is it better than the T57 in my opinion? I don't know, I kind of like that extra DPM, but the turret armour is still really nice, and it's a new kind of playstyle that the 57 Heavy is just not going to be capable of. Similar to the 50B, they're just not going to be able to use the armour that the Kranvang gets, and that's the sacrifice you make. But maybe it's easier for maybe a newer or a kind of less experienced player to play the Kranvang, because the limitation might be that you just don't last as long as if you're playing in the 57 Heavy. So it's a little bit more forgiving because of the armor model that you get. And of course, the grind towards the Kranvang might be substantially better than the 57 Heavy, given Wargaming's recent performances with balancing features. But other than that, I hope you did enjoy this video, and I hope you join me back in the T57 video that we've done recently on the left-hand side of the screen, or the Gameplay and Tank Reviews playlist with loads of vehicles in there on the right. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.